You think you know who Medusa is, the monster. The snakes, the stone-cold stare that turns people to rock. That is the version they showed you, but that is not the whole story. There is another version, older, darker, and it changes everything you thought you knew about this. Legend, a version where Medusa is not a monster at all. A version where she is a young woman, beautiful, innocent, who did nothing wrong, and who is punished anyway, by a goddess, for something that was not her fault. That is the real story of Medusa, and nobody ever told you about it. So before you decide what you think, let me ask you something. How many stories do you know where the monster was actually the victim? Think about that, because what you are about to hear changes the way you look at this legend forever. Let's start at the very beginning. Not the movie version, not the cartoon version, the oldest version, around 700 years before the year zero. A Greek poet named Hesiod wrote a book called the Theogony, The Birth of the Gods, one of the oldest books that still exists today. And in that book, he describes Medusa not as a monster born from darkness, not as a creature that has always been terrifying, as a woman, a mortal woman, with two sisters who were immortal, living in the world like everyone else. Now fast forward 300 years, another writer, a Roman poet named Ovid, he writes a book called the Metamorphoses, which means the transformations, stories of people and creatures who change from one thing into another. And he tells the full story of Medusa. Medusa was beautiful, one of the most beautiful women in the ancient world. People talked about her hair as her greatest feature, long, flowing. She was also a priestess. She served in the temple of Athena, the goddess of wisdom. This was one of the most respected positions. She had dedicated her life to a goddess. She lived inside sacred walls. She was protected, or she was supposed to be, because the whole point of a sacred temple was that it was a place where the rules of the outside world did not apply. That promise was broken, and Athena, the goddess whose temple it was, chose to respond by breaking it further. And then one day, Poseidon arrived. Poseidon, the god of the sea, one of the most powerful gods in the Greek world. He came into the temple of Athena. Now, here is the part of the story that should stop you cold. Athena found out what happened in her temple, and she was furious. So she punished Medusa. Not Poseidon, not the god who forced his way into her sacred space, Medusa, the one with no power. Athena turned Medusa's beautiful hair into snakes. She made her face so terrifying that anyone who looked at her would turn to stone. She made Medusa into a monster, so that nobody would ever look at her the same way again. And then she sent her away, to live alone at the edge of the world, with two sisters who were the only ones who could look at her without turning to stone. Why would a goddess punish the victim? Some say Athena was jealous. Some say she was trying to protect Medusa in the only way she could, by making her so terrifying that no one would ever approach her again. That the snakes and the petrifying gaze were not a punishment, they were armor. It is about what happens when someone who has all the power decides how to tell the story of someone who has none. Now let's talk about what happened next. Perseus, a young hero, sent on a mission by a king who wanted him gone. Medusa was not hunted because she was dangerous. She was hunted because she was powerful. The king wanted her power for himself. Perseus finds Medusa. She is sleeping. He uses a mirror, given to him by Athena, to look at a reflection instead of her. This is the great heroic act of one of the most celebrated heroes, cutting off the head of a sleeping woman. When Medusa's head is cut off, something extraordinary happens from her blood. two creatures are born, Pegasus and Chrysaor. She was not just a monster sleeping in a cave. She was a mother, carrying children she never chose to have. If you were truly terrified of something, would you put its face on your front door? Would you stamp it on your money? For over 700 years, the face of Medusa appeared everywhere. On shields, on armor, on coins, on the front of temples. The Temple of Artemis in Corfu, built around 580 years before the year zero. On the front, the main face is Medusa. She is not presented as a defeated monster. She is presented as a protector. In one of the oldest temples ever built, Roman generals had the face of Medusa carved into the center of their chest armor, right over the heart. In 2008, archaeologists in Turkey found a face, 2 meters tall, carved from stone, the face of Medusa. Placed in a water channel, Athena takes the head and puts it on her shield. Forever, she carries Medusa with her into every battle. Neurologists study a real response called tonic immobility. The body freezes, cannot move. The eye contact itself triggers the freeze in 1997. The fashion house Versace chose her face as their logo. She represents something so powerful that you cannot look away. She was never defeated. Perseus cut off her head, but Medusa went on, carried by a goddess, stamped on coins, still watching. Tell me in the comments, do you think Medusa was a monster? Or something else? Subscribe if you want to keep going deeper.